Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. I've recently talked about a few civilizations that got stronger in Definitive Edition, like the Saracens, Koreans, and Persians. So I thought for this one I'd flip it around and take a look at these civs and units that got weaker. Now, of course, it kind of depends what level of play we're talking about, which map, and even personal preference here. You may sort them differently, and there's nothing wrong with that. But here's my top 10 from the latest balance update. Starting off at number 10 is the Goths. Now, they didn't get a direct nerf, but they're the only civilization missing out on the new technology supplies. What that tech does is reduce the cost of the militia line by 15 food, making them cost 45 food and still 20 gold. Cheap infantry is kind of the Goths' big thing, and even though they still have the cheapest infantry thanks to a civ bonus, it means a lot of other infantry civilizations can keep up cost effectively, where before it wasn't even close. For example, with equal resources against Japanese champions in HD, the Goths' extra numbers meant they ended with around a third of their HP left. On the other hand, in Definitive Edition, with equal resources, it's a pretty even fight. The Goth infantry spam is still going to be strong, and you have the Huskarl, which fills a special raiding and anti-archer role, but their discount champions won't quite be as ridiculously cheap in comparison anymore. Next up at number 9 is the Khmer on water. In the latest balance, they lost the technology Shipwright. Now, Shipwright reduces the wood cost of boats and increases their building speed, so it's an important tech in Imperial Age water control. This automatically makes them worse on late game water, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Their technology tree is pretty good otherwise, but it's not like they have other water bonuses making them overpowered. In fact, in my Civ overview, I only gave them a B+ for late game water, so I'm not completely sure why they're being nerfed here. Not really a water civ to begin with, and definitely not one now. Next up at number 8 is the Briton Trebuchets. In Definitive Edition, the cost went up quite a bit for their technology Warwolf, which gives trebuchets blast damage. Now, their trebuchets are a nice complement to longbows to snipe onagers or just to fire into group of units. This is something to keep in mind if you're playing as Britons, but certainly it's still a strong technology. At number 7, we have Halberdiers. Now, there wasn't a direct nerf, but a few other units were buffed against them. First of all, they now take +2 damage from Geniteurs, where previously they only took regular damage. At the same time, they now do 5 less damage against Mamelukes. Again, the introduction of the supplies tech also makes champions easier to create, which you could say is a rival unit and a strong counter at the barracks. Halberdiers still keep their specialized role against cavalry and as a melee trash unit, but the champion's cost reduction makes them more viable than ever as an infantry meat shield, and it comes at the cost of Halberdiers filling that role. Moving on at number 6 is the Slavs. Their powerful eco bonus of faster farms just got nerfed from 15% to 10%. At the same time, they get free supplies since tracking is automatically given to all civilizations now in Feudal Age. Also, on the plus side, their boyar training time was reduced to 15 seconds, and they're given the ability to research faith. That sounds like giving quite a bit to an already strong civilization, but I still think this is a nerf overall, since faster farming alone was pretty much single-handedly putting them in the top 5 by online win rate. They should still be strong, but just not to quite the same degree in the mid-game. Next up, entering the top 5 is Conquistadors. Their big change is they're now being treated like cavalry archers when it comes to bonus damage from skirmishers and camel archers. The fact this wasn't already the case was probably an oversight to begin with, and it makes skirmishers and especially camel archers much more viable counters to Conquistadors. The Conquistador still has great stats, especially in Castle Age, but those are 2 units they'll have to be a bit more careful around. For example, camel archers lost with equal numbers to Conquistadors in HD, whereas in Definitive Edition they completely dominate in head-to-head fights. Moving on, the number 4 nerf is to tower rushers. The HP of Feudal Age watchtowers has been reduced from 1,020 to just 700. Now, Koreans got a new unit discount buff in order to offset the weaker towers, but there are other civilizations that have viable tower rushes as well that didn't get anything to make up for this. Incas and Teutons come to mind, though towers are seen from almost any civilization on certain maps, like Nomad for example. In general, they're just a bit easier to take down in Feudal Age, though in Castle Age they go back to their regular 1,020 HP. So that's why I say it's tower rushing in particular that's been affected, and not just anyone who likes to build towers in the late game. Entering the top 3, we have the Elite Battle Elephant. In Definitive Edition, their attack was reduced from 16 to 14. The fact their trample damage also does half of their attack to adjacent units means it's 2 less damage to their target and 1 less to every unit around them. Now don't get me wrong, 14 attack still isn't that bad. In fact, it's the same as a paladin. That being said, Battle Elephants are a unit that already has a pretty aggressive bonus from Halberdiers and can be exploited by faster units and monks. Beefy stats are the main thing elephants have going for them, so any reduction there is going to weaken them across the board. Unfortunately, it's another maybe unintentional nerf to the Khmer, who were already lowest in multiplayer performance in HD. Maybe to make up for that, they've now been given Hazar and Faith. Next up at number 2 is American Civilizations. In my opinion, part of the reason American civilizations have always been so strong in the early game was because they had a big leg up in scouting. Eagle Scouts might be slower than Scout Cavalry, but make up for it with 2 more tiles of sight in every direction. If you crunch the numbers, that means they scouted the map 32% faster in HD. In Definitive Edition, Eagle Scouts have lost 1 line of sight. That nerf means their 858 tiles a minute scouting rate drops to just 726 tiles per minute. That's still a bit better than the Scout Cavalry's 648 tiles, but is obviously a big downgrade. To make it worse, in Feudal Age, the Scout Cavalry becomes almost twice as good at scouting as Eagles now. On top of that, for Incas, it's even worse, with their slingers having -1 attack. Of course, they still have +10 against infantry, so they can fill that role, but it makes them a bit less flexible against other units. Again, champions being cheaper because of supplies also isn't great for civilizations that rely on Eagle Warriors, given the +8 bonus damage they take. Now before we get to number 1, I have a couple quick honorable mentions. The first is civilizations without dry dock. Since dry dock now improves trade income, civilizations without it won't have a boost to their trade cogs, which, as I've recently found out, are better than ever. There's been a big push in the balance to give them a situational use, and it feels like Civs with dry dock are in an especially good position to take advantage of that, while the other civilizations are slightly missing out in comparison. In practice, it gives a little over 10% more gold over time, so it's not huge, but definitely an advantage to Civs that do have the tech. Another change that didn't quite make the list is Malians are losing Galleon in exchange for the fast fire ship. This one depends on how you feel about the 2 units, and you might even think this is a buff. Personally, I like that Galleons can raid the shoreline, and I also think they scale better than fire ships. Once you have more than 20 or so, I find it's hard to get them all attacking at the same time. On the other hand, with Malians missing Bracer, you could easily argue their Galleons were at a big disadvantage already, while Fast Fire Ship isn't affected by that missing tech. Overall, it might be a nerf, but it just wasn't clear-cut enough to put them on the list. And finally, I want to mention the infantry unique units, which have gotten an indirect nerf. The ones that come to mind are the Samurai and the Berserk. I should probably just rename this video Top 10 Nerfs thanks to the supplies tech, but by making champions a bit cheaper, it does undermine a few units that made their identity as a stronger version of the champion for a similar price. The Samurai, for example, were slightly stronger while costing 10 gold more, while now it's 10 gold and 15 food, making Samurai in particular, though also Berserks and a few others to a lesser extent, even more situational. But the number 1 nerf in Definitive Edition goes to the Malay. First, they had their elite Battle Elephants attack weakened. At the same time, their Harbors also lost attack while gaining minimum range until you research murder holes. Their base attack was cut in half, though their bonus against ships increased slightly from 9 to 10. In practice, they seem to do about the same against ships, but are much less effective against melee units. Yet another slight nerf to the Malay is to their unique tech Forced Levy. The cost of the tech has been lowered, but now it turns the swordsman gold cost into food, as opposed to eliminating it entirely. After researching supplies, that brings the cost of the two-handed sword down to 65 food, which is 5 more than it used to be. Keep in mind, everyone else's champions also got cheaper. Overall, it's not that any one nerf massively weakened the Malay, but it just felt they got hit by quite a few small things at once. It's death by 1,000 cuts. At least now they'll know how everyone else feels when they're being attacked by Karambit warriors. But those are the top 10 Definitive Edition nerfs in my opinion. Of course, you could argue the biggest nerf is to every civilization that's not the Cumans or any of the other new ones. I'm sure the new Civs will get their own set of nerfs in due time though. If you want to see the full list of balance changes, I'll put the link in the description. There are a few small buffs I didn't mention, like to the Italian Genoese crossbows and a boost to herbal medicine and missionaries. There are also a few more nerfs, like to quick walling and to the Mongols' nomad tech. The Franks, as the previous #1 Civ online by win rate, got away with only a slight nerf of losing their extra scout HP in Dark Age. But that's all for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.